Hello and welcome to the Uncapped Podcast, brought to you by Roast House Pub, one of Frederick's finest craft beer and culinary destinations, where great people come to drink amazing beer. Visit them to track their taps and menu at roasthousepub.com or download the digital Pour app to track what's on tap. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncapped Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sands. We traveled out near Baltimore today to sit in the tap room of the Heavy Seas Brewery with longtime, often referred to as the godfather of Maryland beer, Hugh Sisson, co-founder and owner of Heavy Seas.
Well, cheers. Welcome to Heavy Seas.
Thank you for having us out.
Hell yeah.
So, and I do mean that. I think it's multiple people who often refer to you as the godfather because you have been absolutely instrumental in the ability for Maryland beer to be produced and sold.
That's just because I've been here longer than anybody else.
So that will lead into my next question. Do you even remember what you were doing before you were making and selling beer to Maryland?
Sure. I mean, my undergraduate and graduate degrees were in theater, so I was supposed to be an actor-director type. I ended up in the bar business in 1980 in downtown Baltimore, and I didn't know a damn thing about the bar business other than sitting in a bar stool. So, but I did figure out pretty quickly that you needed to do something to differentiate yourself. So we turned the family bar, it was called Sisson's, into a beer joint in like 81. And that happened because I learned to like beer when I was studying theater in London in the 70s. And that just kind of segued from there. So I've been slinging beer since 1980. And then brewing it since 1989.
So you started with the brew pub Sisson's.
Yep.
And then how long until you decided to go into move to a production brewery?
Well, Sisson's started brewing at Sisson's in August of 1989. We had a bill which went in the Maryland legislature in 87 to legalize brew pubs. I did not expect that bill to pass, and it did. So we were sort of shocked. Oh crap! Now what do we do?
Now we have to.
We have to do it. So then I did the brewing there from 89 to 94, and then left there in 94 to focus just on the production side. And we opened this place in December of 95. So for all intents and purposes, we began brewing in 96.
Okay.
So we're 22 years in. But kind of right after I started brewing at the restaurant, it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And so, yeah, I've been in it for a while.
So when you opened at least on the production end, then the only other person around would have been Oliver's. Correct?
On the production side, no, Wild Goose was still here.
Oh, that's what, yeah.
Frederick
okay.
Brewing Company was here.
That's right.
When I opened here, DeGrowen's was here. Oxford Brewing Company was here. What was it? Mark Toohey's Brimstone was around. So that was the first wave. Interestingly enough, out of the first wave of the folks who were really production breweries, I'm the only one that's still here. So I'm hoping I can say that in another 10 years.
But when you first opened, it was Clipper City.
Clipper City was and still is, the corporate name. So named because Baltimore was where the Clipper ship was first designed and built. If you look at the history or the growth patterns of craft beer over the last 30 years, in the 80s and all the way through the mid 90s, every year the growth was robust. So the year that we opened in 96 is when it went flat for 6 years. Now we got a brand new facility with more capacity than we needed in a market that was collapsing, and I had to turn the Clipper City brand into much more of a mainstream style because that was the only way I was going to survive. So when the market began to harden again, and I want to say in about 2001, I decided it was time now to do some more robust and adventurous styles, and I kind of determined that Clipper City had come to mean one thing, so I needed to do something different. So we created Heavy Seas as the brand where we could place our bigger beers, and that was sort of an interesting segue from the more staid reputation of the Clipper City into the heavy seas.
Okay, that was I think that transition was right around when I was starting to get into craft beer, so I was always confused of why that. But that makes sense.
That's why that occurred. By the time we got to 2010, we decided that we were just going to focus only on heavy seas and remove any other. And during that period of time, we had also acquired the Oxford Brewing Company, so we had 3 brands at one point. We had Clipper City, Heavy Seas, and Oxford. And we needed to focus, so we did that. Now, the funny story about that was the guy who was our sales manager named Joe Gold, who I've known for 30-plus years. I ran into him at Max's on Broadway in Fells Point when I had made the decision that we were going to take away everything and just focus on heavy seas. And he happened to walk in. He wasn't working for me at the time. And I said, Joe, I've decided that Clipper City as a brand is going away. We're just focusing on heavy seas. And he looked me right in the eyeballs and said, that's a really bad idea. And that year we grew 34%. So
good thing you didn't take his advice.
No, and he works with us now. So, but yeah, it was the right call, but you never know until after the fact. I mean, there's a lot of right calls that turned out to not be the right call.
In the heavy seas line, what was one of the first beers in that?
Well, the first beer that was in that was Winter Storm, which was our. It was sort of a reincarnation of our Clipper City Reserve Winter Ale, but we loved the recipe, so that was the first one. And when we were designing that package, because of the name Winter Storm and Heavy Seas, there was a character being tossed about on a raft. And as we were looking at the initial designs, that character was sort of piratey, and because the initial Heavy Seas concept was not pirate, but from that particular illustration, we kind of said, well, wait a minute, maybe that's something we can play with there, cool. And that's where that
kind of slowly.
Well, yeah, that came in, and then there was, I think the second one was the Uber Pills Small Craft Warning. Which will come back in limited draft sometime in 2018. And then the Peg Leg Stout. And then we finally got around to the IPA. And I did it that way specifically because I didn't want the IPA to take over the portfolio. And as soon as we put out Loose Cannon, it took over the portfolio. So
I'd be curious to see the percentages for how many breweries are there that their IPA isn't their number one beer.
I think that's a very small number.
Yeah.
You got the outliers like Allagash, which is their Belgian white, but right, wrong, or different for most of it's going to be the IPA. Americans love hops. I did a presentation the other night, and we sampled everybody, among other things, on our Cutlass Vienna Lager, which is a tremendous beer. It's got 5 GABF medals, I think 1 or 2 World Beer Cup awards. It's an awesome, awesome product. And I gave him the spiel on that, and I said, and unfortunately, almost nobody buys it. And everybody said, why? It's because Americans are in love with hops, and this is not a hoppy beer. So, those of them who want to experiment discover that it's really good, but they love hops.
And I can appreciate almost every style. There are very few examples of it that I like.
Yeah, I'm in that category with Goza. I think it's a style that should be uninvented.
Oh, see, I love Gozas.
See, okay.
I was enjoying a couple last night, and then when my wife would agree with you 100%, she can't stand any beer that is even the slightest bit sour.
Funny story about sours. Years ago, I was... it was either the Craft Brewers Conference or GABF or one of those. And I'm walking around with Spike Bukowski, who's the brewmaster for Terrapin in Georgia. Awesome guy. And he and I are both sort of traditionalists, sours. So somebody comes up to Spike and goes, Spike, dude, you guys ever going to do any sours? And he looked him right in the eye and said, you mean intentionally?
But sours are a traditional style.
Well, it is, but basically for the,
I mean.
Most, for a lot of us, sours are a mistake.
Yeah. Like last night, I was drinking a Burley Oak Dream, which I love that series of beers, and I handed it to my wife. I was like, you gotta try this. This one is amazing.
Right.
She took a sip of it. It was like, how can you drink this? It's awful. I was like, well, you're just wrong.
Well, that's why there's all different kinds.
So you ran down the long list of accolades and awards that you've won for your beer, but one recently that noticed there's a very large sign.
Beer Connoisseur magazine, which is, I think, partly print and partly online, which is sort of a national publication. We just got awarded the 2017 Brewery of the Year, which is really funny because none of us knew it was in the offing. And literally the way I found out is I happened to go on Facebook, and I never go on Facebook, but for one reason I went on Facebook, and one of the things in my feed was from a California brewery who was a runner-up saying, "Wow, thrilled to be part of the company with blah blah blah. Congrats to winners Heavy Seas." And I'm going, "What the hell is that? Jesus Christ! Anybody see this?"
That's pretty. You think they would give you a heads up if they're?
Didn't do a thing. It's funny.
That's funny. Do you know, like, what was their metrics, or how did they?
Well,
judge
they sample and judge products, all throughout the year. And I don't know how many of our beers they looked at, but it was a bunch of them apparently. But we had 3 beers that were in the top 3 scores for the country for the year. So that's how we got it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, of your beers, what's your favorite?
Okay. The politically correct answer is to say I love all my children.
And it's a lie, though.
No, that's not entirely true.
You love one a little bit more.
When you make as many different styles as we do, you do tend to focus on, what's the right product for this particular moment in time. Yeah. Having said that, Loose Cannon is 50% of our business. Loose Cannon pays 50% of my bills. Loose Cannon is my favorite beer. And that will continue for a while.
From a standpoint of you drinking your own beer,
I tend to gravitate toward the hoppier side, and Loose Cannon is up there. I think probably my favorite beer that we make is the Winter Storm that comes out every year. I just think that's an awesome product. That was our first international gold medal winning beer. And also, if you think about it, is the single most brilliant name for a beer ever invented by man. And I say that for one reason and one reason only. It comes out in October and it's petering out on the shelves and sometime in February. So during that period of time, every time the weather gets really crappy, every radio and television station in the country is advertising my product for free.
Nice coup.
Absolutely. You're driving along and they give you the winter storm warning, and it's, yeah, baby.
And I think that's a very underrated style.
The Imperial ESB?
Yeah, or just the ESBs in general, then probably definitely an Imperial.
I agree.
Because when done right, it's an amazing beer.
Well, we used to call it Category 5 ale, and then we sort of took those words off, and I don't know what we were trying to achieve by taking those words off and putting Imperialist. I don't think people give a damn.
Yeah.
They either like it or they don't like it, and it's been around long enough. As I said, that was really the first one that we put out under the Heavy Seas brand name. It's just a great beer.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a gentleman that you know well, Tom Flores, about how a lot of the labeling and names for beers kind of mean nothing at this point.
Right.
Where IPA can just simply be beer.
Right.
At this point, like it's lost its meaning. An IPA isn't an Imperial Pale Ale anymore, or an India Pale Ale anymore.
Right.
It's beer.
Right. Yeah. It's. The evolution of the American consumer's understanding of beer in general over the last 30 years has been staggering. And in the last 10 years, people have really begun to figure out what the hell knuckleheads like me are doing. So that's good. It makes our jobs both easier and more complicated.
You mentioned Uber Pills, and I could be completely wrong about this memory, but is that one of the beers that you had legal issues with the copyright with the name?
No,
or is that a different?
Well, that was, the funny story about that one is we were the first guys in the country to produce that style. I've neglected to trademark the term Uber Pills.
Okay, that's the...
So and then we got a GABF medal for it. I happened to be standing next to a guy named Jack Joyce, who was the founder of Rogue, who was an amazing man. I loved him. But Jack looks at me and goes, "Wow, congratulations, Hugh. Uber Pills, huh?" And within 3 months, Rogue Brewing Company had an Uber Pills in the market. So that's one of the things you go,
Yeah, it's so I guess some of the advice you could give to new brewery owners is
one piece of advice is do your homework on your intellectual property.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's harder and harder to create beer names that you can actually get trademarks on. I mean, we probably have to send we probably have to send a nastygram off at least 2 to 3 times a year to somebody who's inadvertently tripped over one of our trademarks, and we're not trying to be jerks about it. But I mean, guys, this is part of my business. This is my branding, and I'm not going to let you just grab it and walk away.
Yeah.
And I can't do that. I mean, I've got investors. I got a fiduciary responsibility to those people to protect that stuff.
And I also think, like, wrapped up in, like, the public outcry whenever they see someone send a cease and desist for trademark disputes, like, you have to, or you lose it. Like, if you were just like, oh, I can let him use that, like, then you end up losing that trademark.
You can't. It's not a question of you're trying to be a jerk. It is to not do it is bad business. And as I said, if you're running one of these things, you probably have investors, so you've got a fiduciary responsibility to those people to protect their interests. 1, 2, you've got employees, so you've got a responsibility to do everything you can to maintain the viability of the organization so they can continue to work.
Yeah. With the huge number of craft breweries and the seemingly infinite number of beers that are made now, how important do you feel a trademarkable name for a beer is?
It's critically important.
Because that's one thing I've noticed a lot lately. Like, if you go on to Untapped or something to check into a beer, and you look, like, more and more, there will be like 20 breweries with the exact same named beer. Yep. So that just had the thought in the back of my head, like, is that starting to go away, or is it just no one's paying attention if someone has the trademark? And
I think that there's, first off, anecdotally, I would venture to say that 95% of those instances are going to be really, really, really small breweries that are doing 98% of their business in their tap room. So, you can't actually get a trademark on a name unless it's an interstate commerce.
Oh, okay. So if your brewery is only located fully in one state, you can't get a trademark on it?
Probably not.
Oh, wow.
That is what I mean, because I know that one of the criteria that we have to we file and we look for registration, but I can't actually get the mark until I have announced that the product is an interstate commerce. Okay. So that may be part of it. The other thing is, it costs money to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that, you're trying to save a nickel here, and you just kind of, skirt it. But if you do, and somebody who's done their homework, calls you up and says, hey, and most of the time those calls will sound something like, I want you to know you're going to get a letter from my attorney, but I'm just giving you a heads up because I'm not trying to be a Richard here.
Yeah.
You cross this line, I'd appreciate it if we can work this out in an amicable way. So.
Yeah, I found interesting recently, Stone.
With the Keystone thing?
With the Keystone.
Yeah, I really don't know where that's going to go, boy. That's a reach as far as I can see.
I don't know. I mean, I could, if you take his video at face value, where he's talking about how they're more and more using just Stone in their advertising and things.
Well, if that's the case, then he's got a valid point.
And I guess holding the can up so it only shows the Stone part of it is a little dubious.
Right. Well, I've known Greg for a while, and he is a really smart and very clever operator and a brilliant marketer.
Well, that's what I mean. If anything, that was amazing marketing, and it definitely
Right.
it gave them the beer news cycle for a little while.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and I liked the way he ended it too. It's like, all we're asking you is to put the key back into the stone or something like that, and we'll have no problem.
Well, like I said, he's a real character.
So actually, before I get into my next question, because I'm going to ask you to tell a story,
Uh-huh.
I want to thank Roast House Pub for their continued support of the Uncapped podcast, and they often have Heavy Seas beer on tap.
I've been
I
there.
think, you've been in some of the spaghetti dinner nights, I believe.
I don't know that I was there. I've been in there.
Well, I mean,
I
like,
have been
Heavy
in there.
Seas
Yeah.
has been
Yeah.
one of
my
featured,
guys, I'm sure, was about there, but yeah,
one of the featured beers, and I think there's been a Heavy Seas beer dinner there.
could be.
In the past too, which are absolutely always amazing. So thank you again, Roast House Pub, and everyone keep an eye out for a loyalty card. I'll use that in air quotes. But we'll be coming out with a card for Uncapped listeners that will give you special benefits at Roast House Pub. So keep your eyes out and listening
Cool.
for the details on that. And once again, thank you, Nico and Mary and everyone at the Roast House Pub. So I've taken several tours here.
Uh-huh.
And a couple times I've come, my wife always went on and made sure that it was one, like, advertised as one that you were giving.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you still do that?
I do. I actually just did them Saturday. So.
Awesome. So one of my favorite parts of the tour is your impassioned speech about why you should never drink out of a bottle. So I think you should just give my listeners the rundown of why you should not drink out of a bottle.
Okay. Well, the primary reason that you never drink out of a bottle is because 75% of your ability to determine flavor is coming through your sense of smell. So, take a lesson from the wine drinkers. You put it in a damn glass, and when it's in the glass, when you're drinking, your nose is still part of the equation. And not only should you always put it in a glass, but when you put the beer in the glass, it's none of this candy-ass down the side crap. No, you go right down the middle of the glass, and you allow all of the flavor and aroma that my staff busted their fannies to get into that bottle of beer to be released for your beer drinking enjoyment. I mean, that's just, it's just goddamn common sense. So, it's beer. Let's not be dainty about it. Pour a goddamn beer.
Well, so though you did leave out my favorite part of it, where you talk about the spilling over and
and the other thing you got to keep in mind, true, and thank you
if
for
you're going to be an animal and drink out of a bottle.
If you're forced, then you've got to remember that the last thing that happens in the filling process is that the beer is caused to foam, and then the crown comes down, and that's to get the air out. Well, that means that there's always going to be that little layer of beer that gets caught between the crown and the lip of the bottle, and that is the first thing that's going to oxidize. So if you've ever popped the top off a bottle of beer and thrown it down the old gullet post-haste and gotten that nasty-ass tinny flavor in your mouth, that's what that was that oxidized layer of beer. So if you're forced to consume it straight from a bottle, you're supposed to remove your pocket handkerchief. We all carry one of these, right? Vigorously remove said nasty-ass film, and then you can proceed with reckless abandon to enjoy your refreshing party beverage.
So is it do you use tours as your outlet for the
former theatrical crap? I guess. I don't know. I mean, it's more a question of I like to think I've got a pretty good sense of humor. And the thing with life is we often take it all entirely too seriously. So I enjoy telling stories, and I enjoy having a laugh. And I think that's probably more what drives anything than any particular theatrical aspirations.
Well, I mean, I've twice now I've taken tours of Heavy Seas that you gave, and I could definitely say
there's a performance aspect to it.
But you give one of the more entertaining tours.
Well, thank you.
It's educational and entertaining.
Well, that's what I'm really trying to do, because if you just do technobabble, nobody cares.
Oh, yeah. So I would even say, for someone like me who's toured hundreds of breweries at this point, and the second time I came here, it was after being at hundreds of breweries.
Right.
It's still informative and entertaining.
Yep.
It's not listening to the same, blah blah blah. The work goes into in technical aspects.
No, that's, I mean, and I think that is a direct throwback to, when I was doing that kind of stuff, because, if it's not entertaining, you're not going to hold their attention. And if you don't hold their attention, you're really not doing them. I mean, why did they bother to come?
Yeah.
So I just think that that's pretty important. And as I said, it makes it more fun for me, too.
So what about people who drink out of cans? Are they animals also? Or are you
well,
okay with out of a can?
You have to look at it from this standpoint. Why did they buy the cans in the first place? They probably bought them because they're boating or they're on the golf course or whatever. So yeah, you are screwing yourself a little bit because your nose is still now cut out of the equation. But I think the reason that I preach so heavily about that is when you're paying $10 to $12 a six pack for a six pack of good beer, I want you to experience what you paid for. And if you're drinking it straight out of the can, you're probably doing that because of the context of what you're in. So you're just understanding, you're making that compromise up front. But yeah, screw the cans. Drink it out of the goddamn glass.
I almost will never drink a beer out of a bottle, but I will find myself in occasions where I'll drink out of a can.
Well, I mean, it depends what you're doing. I mean, if you're boating, you're probably drinking out of the can.
Yeah, or at a pool or
exactly.
the beach, or you've snuck something someplace you're not supposed to have it there. A can is a better vessel. So we briefly touched on all of the bills and things you had to have passed just to open.
Uh-huh.
So, and we discussed a little bit beforehand that right now is almost another one of those critical moments. Maybe not as, although in some ways it has a direct effect on heavy seas.
Sure it does.
So how do you feel that things are going right now? Are you do you think we're headed in a good place, or
I think
are
we're
you worried
potentially
that it's becoming ugly?
I think it has become ugly. It's not if it will become ugly, it has become ugly. And I think we're moving in a good direction in that partly as a byproduct of the ugliness, the members of the legislature are actually beginning to understand these issues from other than, some large lobbying group telling them what the hell they're supposed to vote on. So that's positive. And I think that partly because of the ugliness that has come about, I do believe that some of the other factions, and the factions being basically retailers, wholesalers, brewers, are going to be a lot more willing to, in good faith, sit down and have conversations. So I think that there is some positive stuff to be gotten out of all this. I don't know what the timeline's going to look like. The comptroller certainly has been enormously helpful because he forced the conversations to take place. But we can't force people to come up with agreements.
Yeah.
So while there's been a lot of good, I'm just really hopeful that whether it's now or next year or whenever, that we can begin. We all have to realize that it's in everybody's best interest to continue to move this ball down the field.
Now, you definitely have strong relationships with distributors, and I would assume with the wholesalers.
Yeah,
and
I mean, those are my
retailers.
customers. Those are my business partners.
The people you talk to, do you get a sense from them that they feel like if breweries are allowed to sell more of their own beer themselves, that it puts them in jeopardy, or is that a narrative pushed forth just by lobbying? And
I
entities?
do believe that there are retailers who feel that taproom sales are cutting into their business, and I can't with certainty tell them that they're wrong. I can tell them that most of the information that I'm receiving anecdotally is that the taprooms are helping drive people into their places of business, and they're ordering the beers that they've experienced in taprooms.
Yeah.
So But whether or not we're actually cutting into their overall business, that I can't say. I can say that, on a broad basis, the on-premise business is down. We didn't cause that. That's just life. Beer vis-a-vis wine and spirits is slightly down. We didn't cause that. So I'm wondering whether or not there's some confusion between my business is harder than it used to be and, these guys' fault, to my business is just harder than it used to be, and we need to figure out how to do it better.
Well, yeah, because even from the standpoint of retail places, that there are a lot more choices than ever.
Exactly.
So there's a lot more competition within that industry itself.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, nothing's getting any easier. I mean, my business is as competitive as it has ever been. And, we just have to acknowledge that this is, we either rise to the occasion or we go away. So I can understand their fearfulness that this is indeed the case. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I think we just need to find a way. Now, one other thing that we want to keep in mind, and this is something that I think people lose sight of, is that I can't sell you a product that I don't own or make. So, I'm not going to have the booze. I'm not going to have the wine. So I'm not a bar.
Yeah. There's a lot of...
I'm a place where people can buy my products, and that's it.
Yeah. Although despite some of its other problems for the alcohol-related industries in Pennsylvania,
right,
that's one thing that they're even allowed to do in Pennsylvania.
Really? I wasn't aware of that.
If you own a brewery, a winery, or distillery in Pennsylvania, you can sell any other product as long as it has to be produced in Pennsylvania.
Okay, well...
So a Pennsylvania brewery can sell Pennsylvania-created spirits and wine.
Right. Well, I mean, again, that's something that the Pennsylvania legislature obviously looked at and decided was okay.
It was. I think it's only like a year or two old.
In this market, I mean, I think we have to we have to acknowledge the fact that I don't want to be a competitor for my customers. If you buy a pint of beer over the bar here, you're going to pay the same thing here that everybody's going to pay in most bars and restaurants. Why is that? It's because I don't want to be their competitor. You spend the same amount of money for a six-pack here, and we have customers sometimes say, "Well, it should be cheaper here," and the answer is no, it shouldn't be. If you buy a bottle,
because then it's a very valid complaint.
Absolutely, and these those folks are my bread and butter. This is fluff. We like it. It's nice fluff. It's high margin fluff. And even more importantly, it's brand building. Yeah.
It's great for education and all those reasons.
But I mean, my business is wholesale distribution.
And so speaking of wholesalers too, I think, and I hope people are listening, because one of the things we touched on this briefly beforehand, that I've seen that a misconception that breweries right now want to break apart the 3-tier system.
Absolutely
that
not.
They don't want to have distributors and I know you definitely
I'm
want
a huge supporter of the 3-tier system.
And it's been echoed. I mean, I'm sure because there are differing opinions. There's one or two brewery owner that thinks that it isn't, but there may not be. But for the vast majority, this has nothing to do with tearing apart the 3-tier system. They just want some changes made, well, basically just in franchise law.
But there are some areas where we have work to do to improve it. But you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah. What people don't realize is it's the distributors who get my product from this facility out onto the store shelves. They're the ones who facilitate that. I need them to be successful because that's how they can continue to do that.
You want them to.
Absolutely, I want them to be successful. The other thing people tend to realize or don't seem to realize is that because virtually all the beer distributors, are either affiliated with Bud, Miller, Coors, or Miller and Coors combined. I'm thinking, well, that's bad. No, it's not bad. It's because of the viability of those products that those trucks can leave that warehouse every day full. If you don't have a full truck leaving your warehouse, you're not making any money. So those cases are allow brands like me and some of the smaller brands for the distributor to be able to exactly. Those brands are what are paving the way to get us on the shelves. Then we have to pull through, and then we have to perform. But no, I mean, the 3-tier system. Without the 3-tier system, craft beer would not be what it is today.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for you, but I assume you don't want to go buy a fleet of trucks and deliver all of your beer.
No, I don't want to do that at all. And it's funny. I think that's one of the issues that the distributors are so fearful of. And the truth of the matter is the economics don't work. You've got to have multiple brand families in your distributorship to make that work. I mean, invariably, if you're self-distributing, you're going to get a phone call from a draft account at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and somebody's got a hot shot of a keg of beer, and it's a 2-hour ride, and you're making $30 on that keg.
Yeah.
And so to not drop the ball, you're probably $50 in the hole for the delivery. Plus, you got all those receivables. I don't want those receivables. So, no, I mean, there are ways to improve the climate, but I need the middle tier. The middle tier is how we stay alive.
Yeah, and you need the end.
Well, of course you need the end. I mean, because they're the ones that bring the product to the consumer. So
yeah.
No, I mean we're not here to hurt them. We're just trying to grow the whole piece.
Yeah, I feel like there's been some misconception from the craft beer enthusiast community,
right,
on what breweries want.
Well, that I think that you're right, and unfortunately, there's some very enthusiastic consumers who, with the best of intentions, are actually making this difficult because they don't understand the way the system really works. So, the distributor is not my enemy. We may have areas where we don't completely see eye to eye, but they're not my enemy.
Yeah.
The retailers are not my enemy.
It's a symbiotic relationship. You need each other.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, we appreciate your support. If you do reach out for your legislator, be polite and do not get all snarky because that doesn't do anybody any good.
As we saw repeatedly mentioned during the testimony on Friday.
Just be courteous, make your point. You can make your point without dropping a sling of F-bombs.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely do not appreciate being sworn at.
No.
Having
Who does?
their intentions questioned.
Right.
Because and I think that's a big problem with politics in general.
Well, these days everything is so divisive and so high energy.
Yeah, and people will see part of the picture and insert intentions or all these other things that even the slightest implication, then they're exacerbated. So everyone should just calm down and not think that everything is done with bad intentions.
That is correct.
Be polite and persistent in your advocacy.
The point of having a conversation is to attempt to bring somebody either over to your point of view or to discover a point of view in the middle where you can both agree to agree. And you can't do that if they're in the defensive posture.
Yeah, because then no one listens well that way.
Done.
So, we'll switch gears to happier subjects now. So the
pirate walks into the bar. When he walks into the bar, the bartender looks at him and notices he has a steering wheel sticking out of his posterior. He says, "Oh man, that's really gotta hurt." He says, "Yar, it's driving me nuts." On to lighter topic matters.
So, you talked about Americans' love affair with the hops.
Yep.
You have a whole line of IPAs now.
Yep.
And I noticed one of them is a hazy IPA.
Yep.
So how do you feel about that current trend?
If you're talking about the flat out New England style IPAs, which this is not.
Yeah, that's more of like just an unfiltered.
It's an unfiltered, and it's definitely a hazy style. But it's I'm not a huge fan of the quote unquote true New England IPA because first off, it's got no shelf life, and secondly, it's got yeah, and I'm not picking on any one particular beer, but the concept of instructing people to only drink it out of a can, we just talked about that earlier. Why would you do that? It's because you don't want them to actually see all the crap that's floating in the glass.
Well, I think I know exactly we're talking about Heady Topper,
right?
But I would assume that at this point they could remove that from.
I think they could do anything they want. I mean, clearly, it's an enormously successful product. I've had it; it's a very good product.
Well, I mean, just from the standpoint of like they were creating that beer back when everyone expected to hold up a pale ale and be able to see through a crystal clear thing. Now, if you follow any online drinking groups, like actual sludge in a can doesn't even bother people anymore.
Right.
So,
but again, to me, and I've been doing this a long time. That to me, that's unprofessional.
Old school
brewers. But that doesn't mean that I'm right. I mean, one of the speeches that I give when I finish my tours, for the last couple of years, is a whole thing about at the end of the day, it's totally subjective. So what you like is what's important, and if you really like these things, I wouldn't, because I'm coming at it from a different perspective. But if that's what floats your boat, have at it. Junky or not.
But as long as it's not a Goza.
Well, I don't. I think Goza is a style that should be uninvented, but that's all right.
So you're saying that there will never be a Heavy Seas Goza?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that I won't drink it.
You won't be doing any of the quality control.
No, I'll be outside of that one. But no, I'm not a Goza fan. So we have folks in the brewery who are Goza fans. I think our quality team leader Megan's a Goza fan, but not me.
Well, they're great beers. You should make one.
I'll never say never. And we're putting in a new 15-barrel pilot plant, so we may play games with some things along those lines in that facility.
Yeah, so you recently just went through a fairly large expansion.
Well, we're still in the process of doing it, right? So yeah, we just moved our offices and warehouse and shipping and receiving facilities into an adjacent 20,000 square foot of space, and we're in the process of expanding the tap room. First wave is done because we knocked down those old offices, so this is much bigger than it used to be. This is going to double again in size.
Okay.
Not sure what the timeline looks like, because we're also installing a new canning line and a new smaller brewing facility to do some experimental and smaller batches of stuff. So, yeah.
So actually, that's something I've always been curious about. When you both can and bottle, how do you decide what to put in what?
Well, it's all based on orders. I mean, we only have 1.5 products that are exclusively in one format. So, for example, the Pilsner is only in 16-ounce cans. It's not in bottles anymore.
Okay.
The Smooth Sail Summer Ale, which is a limited release, is only in cans and draft. Loose Cannon is both formats. Tropicana is both formats. Right now, Americanon is just bottles. Most retailers only want one of the two. So, and some of it's driven by, seasonality. I mean, during the summer, you're going to sell more cans than you do in the winter. So, some of it's just kind of guessing.
So with the mention of the new canning line, do you plan on shifting mainly to cans, or is that just to add more capacity?
No, that's to add more capacity to it. I mean, it gives us more than twice the throughput on the equipment, and the new one's going to give us the ability to do 12-pack cans in-house. We can also do 16-ounce cans. We can do a bunch of different things on the new line that will just make it a little easier to be reactive to what we think the market's looking for.
Okay. Yeah, this is the first time I've been here since I think the last time I was here, the expansion was just about to start.
Okay.
And so this is definitely, the tap room is substantially larger.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It would get a little claustrophobic.
Well, I mean, the thing that's been interesting is, we more than doubled the space, and it fills up. So, thank you very much.
So you're looking forward to making it bigger?
Yeah, although it's not so much because I think people are. It's more comfortable as we add the additional space that we're going to be adding now. Then we'll be able to incorporate some things that make it a little more sort of consumer, family friendly, which is what tap rooms are really supposed to all be about. It's not you're not going to the local pub. You're kind of going to a neighborhood space, for lack of better words.
Then there's one other story that I enjoyed during the tour that both times when we ended in the tap room you told about the talk you gave at your daughter's college.
Oh, is this when we went up for the beer festival there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This was my daughter went to Susquehanna University, which is in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, which is 45 minutes north of Harrisburg, and she was accepted. This was the summer between her senior year in high school and her freshman year, and they had a beer festival going on up there. And somebody reached out for me, and so I said, "We're going, and you're working it with me." "But Dad, I'm 18 years old." "Shut up! You're working with me. You can't drink it, but you can certainly pour it." Anyway. So we get up there, and she says, "But you don't distribute up here." I said, "I know." And she said, "Well, why the hell are we doing this?" I said, whoa. You got to understand. You are going to live in this town for the next 4 years, and half the people that are attending this festival are somehow or other affiliated with Susquehanna University. And you have now established yourself that you are the daughter of a brewery owner. I have just made you a celebrity. Use it to your advantage, girl. Use it to your advantage. So that's funny.
Which I think is great thinking and amazing parenting.
And to this day, I still don't think we sell any beer in Selinsgrove.
So from at least from a business decision, it didn't pan out.
No,
was she
but
popular?
Yeah. It was also very funny because during the years that she was there, there was a movie called "She's Just Not That Into You," or He's Just Not That Into You, that came out with Bradley Cooper and blah blah blah, and our beer was prominently featured in the movie. The opening scene, he's got a 6-pack of our beers he's buying as now. Unfortunately, between the time they shot the film and they released it, we had changed the package designs. But she definitely got a chuckle because her friends were watching the TV commercials. "Oh, that's your dad's beer. That's your dad's beer." So funny.
All right, so a couple of questions I close out every episode with. Due to your longevity in the industry, I hope you have a good answer to this, better than a lot of people's. What is the most ridiculous review you've ever seen about one of your products or your brewery?
The most ridiculous thing I ever saw, and it just pissed me off, and it was such a good example of how the problem with the internet is that everybody thinks that they're now an expert and they can pontificate. Is that there was some guy was doing a review and he was talking about Winter Storm, and I think Winter Storm, that was the year it won the gold medal at the World Beer Cup.
Even better timing.
And this guy just was talking about and he began to just rip in a new one because it was hoppy, and I'm looking at this thing and it's an Imperial ESB. And it was so apparent that this guy knew absolutely nothing, but God damn it, he was going to make sure he let the world know. And that's part of the problem is that a lot of this stuff, a lot of this online crap is there's a lot of people who think that the only way that they assert their superiority is by tearing down somebody else's work. And so I got no room for that. It just pisses me off. If you can't say anything nice.
Next, what is your favorite or one of your favorite non-heavy seas made Maryland beers?
Heavy seas, non-heavy seas Maryland made beers. I have.
And that question changes by brewery. I don't ask everyone what their favorite non-heavy seas beer is.
I mean, that's fine. I don't have a beer particular in mind. I'm not a sours fan, so that kind of eliminates a bunch of stuff, and that's no reflection of the quality of those products. Just that's personal preference. I have a huge amount of respect for the guys at the Brewers Art, only because, they were doing the Belgian thing when nobody was particularly focused on that. And I think they've done it really well over the years. Unfortunately, I'm getting to the point in my career where I'm kind of Belgianed out, but I still have a huge amount of respect for that. I think that what Tommy Knorr is doing down at Evolution is pretty cool. So I like those products. I think that what John and company are doing over at Union is pretty good. I'm actually really bullish on a lot of what I'm seeing in a lot of the smaller Maryland breweries that are coming up. And some of them aren't that small. I mean, Evolution's certainly not that small. So, I've tried a lot of people's beers over, the course of the 30-some years that I've been doing this, and I'm pleased to say that so many of them I think are well made. Even if they're not styles that I particularly like, the products are well made. So, lots of kudos there to the rest of the guys.
Do you have anything coming up soon, or any new beers coming up that you want to let everyone know about?
Well, we just did the Americanon, which is it's a new year-round product, and we're pretty excited about that. I think the biggest thing right now is we're just focused on getting the new canning line and getting the new pilot brewery up and running. I'm really excited about the pilot brewery. I mean, it gives us the ability to do 15 barrel batches of beer or smaller. I think one of the things that we want to do with that will be a lot more draft-only collaborations, among other things, featuring a lot of our Maryland peers. And the other thing that I'm really, really excited about that is that I haven't personally brewed a batch of beer in 24, 25 years. And once we install this son of a gun, I'm getting out a new set of rubber boots and I'm going in. So I'm going to try to actually recreate. First thing I'm going to do is try to recreate the Stockade Amber Ale, which was my number one seller at Sisson's, if I can remember how the hell I do it. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that'll be that. Yeah, I'm pumped about that. So.
Yeah, you mentioned collaborations. That's definitely something you've gotten a lot more into.
Yeah. Well,
recently.
I mean, we always wanted to do it. There was a period of time when I think people got the impression that we just felt we were above everybody else and didn't want to do it. And that was nothing could have been further from the truth. Before we expanded this brew house and some of this other stuff, which we did in the last 4 years, we couldn't fill the orders. So, and everybody else was running around doing collaborations, and it was kind of like, I can't, because every time, I call up a distributor and say, I got the new version of such and so, he would say, yeah, well, fuck that. Where the hell's my loose cannon? Yeah. So we couldn't do it. It wasn't that we didn't want to do it. So once we got this, then we started doing this whole series of the partnerships, we call them.
Which I think is an awesome name.
Yeah, it fits. But and we've had a blast, and we want to do more of them. We're switching them beginning this year. They're only going to be on draft. Okay. And we'll be doing smaller batches because it's more fun to just do lots of things. Then you got 100 barrels of something, and you got to make it go away, and that becomes a distraction. But no, we've had a blast. I mean, they've been a lot of fun. I've been really enjoyed working with some of these other folks.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing for both sides of the business.
Oh yeah,
because I've heard that a lot too. That just it's great working with your peers and learning things from each other, and from the consumer standpoint. A lot of times what come out of those is that it's a style that your favorite brewery may not necessarily have made on their own.
Right.
It's that collaboration from the other place, that what they're known for, and blending those two expertise or your fingerprint.
Or there's some other interesting things. I mean, we did a collaboration with the new Guinness facility. And what we did with that particular one is that we both used the same base grain bill, and then they added things to theirs, and then we did some things differently than ours. We did ours in a Belgian style. They did theirs actually using our ale culture, cool. and theirs was more sort of malty traditional. Wasn't like a stout, but it was a much more traditional style beer, and ours was much more sort of Belgian, whatever. I liked theirs better than I liked ours, but that's because I'm kind of Belgianed out.
Yeah.
But that was enormously fun because we basically, it was sort of like that, one of those chef competitions where they give you the ingredients and
see what you can do.
Bingo. And then that was fun. And I hope to do another one with them.
When you were over there, did you try to sneak some of the yeast out?
No. And actually, I didn't do it. Some of my staff did. But no, it was fun.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing more of those.
Me too.
That's one of my favorite things in the craft beer industry is collaborations and the fun stuff that's done.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for having us out.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Cheers.
Cheers.